Part 20. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 191. Time passed day by day, and 2 days passed. At noon the next day, Chen Hao sat at the long dining table and ate lunch as usual. On the side, a blonde girl with a pair of butterfly wings behind her was standing next to him. She was dressed gorgeously, and lines could be seen on her wings, and the lines emitted a golden halo. She had a holy and pretty face, holy and beautiful, but on her forehead, there were 2 tentacles, like butterfly tentacles. She stood dignifiedly aside, watching Chen Hao's every move with her golden eyes. This guy was the former Bright Butterfly Beast, and now Bright Butterfly Beast has evolved to the Half-Emperor stage and become the Radiant Emperor Butterfly. Half-Emperor stage Radiant Emperor Butterfly. Taming degree, 100%. Radiant Emperor Butterfly, a light attribute monster, evolved from the Light Saint Butterfly in the Holy Beast stage. Special move, Light Illumination. Light Illumination can instantly heal the target illuminated by the light and restore it to a fully victorious state. Xiaodi's personality is similar to Xiaoying's. It is not interested in hunting. What it cares most about is the every move of its master Chen Hao. Therefore, Xiaodi always likes to stay with Chen Hao. Because she noticed that Chen Hao's food was very ordinary, and there was a kitchen in the palace, Xiaodi recently began to ask Chen Hao for ingredients, became the kitchen, and was responsible for Chen Hao's eating problems. Whenever Chen Hao was eating, it liked to stand by and observe Chen Hao's every move to see if Chen Hao liked the food it made. Chen Hao is not picky about food. In his previous life, Chen Hao, who was extremely poor, ate instant noodles with ham, the best thing. Endless food card, the food taken out is all ingredients, not cooked food. But milk and meat are very fresh. Just get some milk to eat and take some meat to roast. For Chen Hao, they are all delicious. Of course, Xiaodi wants to be a chef, and Chen Hao is naturally happy. It must be said that Xiaodi is really a talented chef. Although he has never seen anything like it, the food it makes tastes great. Chen Hao opened the book while eating and looked at the 3 dragon egg cards in the card slot. Incubation period dragon egg. Incubation rate, 91%. 2 days have passed, so it should hatch tomorrow. Master, suddenly, a voice came. Chen Hao stopped eating and looked at Shataya standing in front of the gate. Shataya smiled and said, Master, I want to go to the bright divine realm today. 2 days later, Shataya evolved from the awakening period to the holy beast period. Now Shataya has the strength comparable to that of a transcendent god, but is still a little worse than the Lord God. Chen Hao said with a smile, Well, are you going to hunt the god's emperor core in the light realm? Well, no, Shataya chuckled, my main purpose is not to hunt the god's emperor core, I plan to find Bader. Bader. Shataya hummed, Bader, the god of light. Shataya said, after I evolved to the holy beast stage today, I can feel its breath. Last time, that guy was always against me. In the last war of gods, it took the initiative to find other gods to unite and attack me. In that battle, I stared at it. In that battle, it was the most injured besides me. Serious. I can feel it now, it is in the domain of the god of light, and its strength is only at the cub stage. Speaking of this, Shataya chuckled, crossed her arms and said, it seems that its godhead is broken like me, and it has only recently begun to revive. Hearing this, Chen Hao's eyes suddenly lit up, you mean, cub stage? Shataya hummed, and it smiled and said, yes, it is a cub stage. I plan to teach it a lesson and whip it hard. That guy, 30,000 years ago, that guy was very arrogant. Listening to Shataya's proud and expectant smile. If you don't know, you would think that the god of light bullied it 30,000 years ago. In fact, it was Shataya who provoked the war 30,000 years ago. This guy is a devil who almost destroyed other races. The actions of the God of Light are reasonable. Chen Hao retracted his sight and looked at the universal book floating in front of him. He stretched out his hand to open the book and took out the life sensor identifier from it. Chen Hao pressed the button. The identifier glowed and projected a picture. Chen Hao said, "I want to know the location of the God of Light Balder." As Chen Hao's voice fell, a map appeared on the screen. This map is exactly the location of the God of Light. Through this map, you can see that there is a temple in the middle of the map, and there is a red dot in the temple. That red dot is obviously the location of the God of Light Balder. Chen Hao stretched out his hand and clicked on the red dot. Cub Stage Lightboy. Lightboy, a light attribute monster, is composed of the broken godhead of the God of Light absorbing a large amount of magic elements, and has a powerful strength beyond ordinary monsters. Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows. Last time, Chen Hao found that he could open the map of the entire VAF continent and find the location of the endless cave through this thing. Therefore, Chen Hao thought about giving it a try to see if he could open the map of the God of Light from a distance and sense the location of the God of Light. Now it seems that it is indeed possible. Then, can we do this? Thinking, Chen Hao took out the trap rope card from the book. Transform. The trap rope card turned into a rope, and the rope turned like a snake and flew out of the balcony quickly. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared from Chen Hao's sight. Chen Hao thought, can it be done? Super long range capture, God. Master, then I'll go first, a voice came from the side. Chen Hao came back to his senses. He looked at Shataya. Shataya was looking at him, with a questioning look in her eyes. Shataya didn't know what Chen Hao had just done. Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled and said with a smile, "Wait a minute, I'll do another experiment." Shataya was startled, its eyes were shining, and a smile appeared on its face. "Yeah." Chen Hao picked up the chopsticks and continued to eat. About a minute passed. Two cards suddenly appeared in front of Chen Hao. Chen Hao was slightly startled. He looked at the two cards in front of him. Chen Hao couldn't help but smile on his face. One of them was the trap rope card. And the other one. Cub Stage Lightboy. Taming Degree, 0. Chen Hao put away the trap rope card, and then picked up the card of the Lightboy. He looked at Shataya and said with a smile, "You don't have to go to the God of Light." Shataya was startled, and its eyes were full of confusion. "Why is that?" Chen Hao reached out and handed the card to Shataya. Shataya was slightly startled, and it reached out to take it and looked at it. Its eyes condensed slightly, and then looked at Chen Hao. "Badra, was it also created by you, the Master? I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 192. Chen Hao looked at Satya's surprised expression and blinked. 2. For Satya, the reason why it was conquered by Chen Hao was because it was created by Chen Hao. This is the memory added to it by the universal book. Now that the God of Light is subdued by Chen Hao, in Satya's view, the God of Light was also created by Chen Hao. Before Chen Hao could speak, Satya showed a sudden look and smiled. "I almost forgot that this world was originally created by the Master. The other gods in this world besides me were also created by the Master, and they were also created by the Master. Normal." Satya smiled. "If you think about it this way, it would be inappropriate for me to fight with them." With that said, Satya returned the card to Chen Hao. Chen Hao took it and said with a smile, "As long as you know, life is very precious, so you should cherish it." Satya hummed, "Well, Master, I'm taking Fire Phoenix and the others to hunt in the God's realm." Chen Hao's smile froze. "I just said let it cherish life, but the result." Chen Hao coughed, "Go." Satya smiled, stood up and left. Chen Hao picked up the chopsticks and looked at the map of the divine realm of light projected by the identification device in front of him. The red dot that represented Baldur just now has disappeared. How about taking a look at the gods in other divine realms? What level are they at now? Thinking of this, Chen Hao said, I want to know the location of the god of the ocean. The map changed and became a map of the ocean god's domain. In the middle of the map, you can see a little red dot. Chen Hao stretched out his hand and nodded. Main god period ocean goddess. The goddess of the ocean, the god of water-based monsters, the ancestor of all water-based monsters, and the creator of the mermaid tribe. The goddess of the sea did not participate in the battle with Satya back then, but she is still in peak condition now. Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows. Open the seat of the forest goddess. The forest goddess, also called the goddess of life, is the creator of the elves and humans. Chen Hao is quite interested in this god. Because, Chen Hao's body is the human body. In other words, the goddess of life can also be regarded as my main god. Main god period forest goddess. The forest goddess, a wood-attributed monster, was seriously injured due to the battle with the dark goddess more than 30,000 years ago, and currently only has the strength of a god general. Chen Hao found another god of earth. The god of earth still has the strength of the god king stage. Back then, the four gods of light, earth, forest, and storm teamed up to besiege Satya. As a result, the god of light was destroyed, and the other three were also seriously injured. Satya, the oldest goddess among the seven main gods, was truly terrifying at her peak. However, it is a pity. If the earth and forest are broken like the god of light and need to be resurrected, I can capture them too. Catching God. This feeling is still good. However, the tameness of the god of light is now 0. In the cub stage, it will take until tomorrow to completely tame it and reach 100%. Just wait. Chen Hao suddenly noticed something that looked like a bowl of ice cream next to him. Chen Hao picked up the thing, picked up the spoon and took a taste. Is this ice cream? The taste is almost exactly the same as ice cream. Chen Hao looked at the Yaoguang Emperor butterfly beside him. How is this done? When Xiadi heard this, she said, I noticed that those people in the human palace would eat some ice-cold desserts at the end of their meals. Then I got rid of the Ice Queen and added cow's sugar, and then asked the Snow Queen to help me freeze them and smash them. And then it became like this. The Ice Queen is the half-emperor stage evolution of the Snow Lady. Hearing this, Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows and said with a smile, it's delicious. It seems that you really have the talent to be a chef. A smile appeared on Xiadi's face. Actually, the Ice and Snow Empress also contributed. Without her help, I wouldn't have been able to complete this dessert. Chen Hao smiled, okay, tell it for me when the time comes. Just tell it that I think it's in good shape. Xiadi smiled sweetly, yeah. After Chen Hao finished eating, he stood up and walked out the door. Owner. Owner. As soon as Chen Hao went out, he heard a voice from next to him. Chen Hao took a look and found several high-level wood elves standing at the door. These high-level wood elves are the high-level wood elves bred by the life god tree that has evolved to the god general stage. High-level wood elves are more delicate and beautiful in terms of height, appearance. After ordinary wood elves are born, they have the strength of mature monsters, while high-level wood elves have the strength of the awakening stage as soon as they are born. The god of life, General Shu, made these little guys responsible for the sanitation and other tasks of the palace. They were looking at me with smiles and expectancy. Chen Hao smiled, stretched out his hand and touched the head of a high-level wood elf, and said with a smile, work hard. Yeah, thank you for the encouragement, Master. The faces of these high-level wood elves were full of happiness and joy. Chen Hao smiled, nodded slightly, withdrew his gaze and walked towards the balcony. Chen Hao walked to the balcony, past the balcony, and looked ahead. Looking here, Chen Hao could see the wood elves playing in the courtyard and the divine ice angels who had evolved to the god general stage. God bless the ice angels, they are the water. Only a few days have passed, and Shuyi and the others have transformed from 0-degree elves into blessed ice angels. The blessed ice angel has 2 pairs of wings behind it, silver hair, and the figure of an adult woman. It looks cold and noble. These 7 little guys have nothing to do, so they play with the wood elves. There are a few snow girls next to them, but the snow girls and snow monsters are walking around aimlessly. The snow girls and snow monsters don't seem to be as sociable as the wood elves, Chen Hao muttered. However, it's not surprising, because the snow girls and snow monsters were already adults when they were captured by Chen Hao. They have their own personalities and are relatively independent. It's normal for them to be unsociable. Chen Hao looked not far away. Not far away, a group of small dark spirits were surrounding a flashing night charm. That's Tu San. Xiaoying's voice came from the side. Chen Hao turned his head and saw Xiaoying sitting on his shoulder. Chen Hao smiled, retracted his gaze, and looked at Tu San in front of him. Chen Hao retracted his gaze. He has collected a lot of beasts during this period. However, these beasts seem to be idle now. There is no need to let them go to the god's domain to participate in hunting. Because there are enough people, the emperor cores obtained every day cannot be used up. Then let them do something else. So what should they do? Or, take them to unify the world. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 193. Unifying the world is crazy. Chen Hao raised his head and looked at the blue sky above. A giant oriental dragon was circling in the sky. For Chen Hao, he was out of tune with this world. Since he entered this world, he has been out of touch with the ordinary life of this world. In Chen Hao's view, he is like a traveler in this world and an observer of this world. But if you want to unify this world, you are not an observer, but a ruler. I still prefer a leisurely life. Forget about the ruler's business. Master, a voice came. Chen Hao came back to his senses and looked around. He saw the big pig appear beside him. It saluted slightly to Chen Hao, and then said, "Master, I caught 5 invading humans." Chen Hao was startled. Invading humans? The big pig nodded slightly. They came up secretly on flying mounts, thinking that we didn't know. Chen Hao thought about it for a while and understood. 5 people, that should be an adventurer team, and an adventurer team is a unit of 5 people. It is normal that the mysterious island will attract people's attention when it flies over the head of the WAF continent in its revealed state. It is normal for adventurer teams with an adventurous spirit to choose to come up for adventure. Chen Hao smiled and said, "Since they are visiting, they are guests. Don't scare them. Invite them to the restaurant. By the way, tell Zayadi and ask them to prepare some food. I want to treat the guests to a good meal." When the big pig heard it, he smiled and nodded slightly. "Okay." Chen Hao walked towards the restaurant on his own. "Master, you seem to have just finished breakfast." Xiao Ying's voice came from the side. "Will it be bad for your health if you eat more?" Chen Hao smiled. Eating breakfast does not mean that the guests have eaten. When Xiao Ying heard it, it nodded slightly. Chen Hao entered the restaurant and sat down. He sat at the table and waited quietly. After a while, Chen Hao heard a sound coming from the door. Chen Hao raised his head and looked at the door of the restaurant. I saw the big pig standing at the door, and next to the big pig, there were several humans. The 5 people were as pale as paper at this moment. The big pig saluted slightly to Chen Hao, with a smile on his face. "Master, the guests are here." Chen Hao nodded slightly, and he looked at the 5 people. The 5 people, 4 men and 1 woman, had pale faces and looked particularly nervous. Looking at their expressions, Chen Hao showed a friendly smile. "Don't be afraid, whoever comes is a guest, sit down. I prepared breakfast for you 5 strangers." You flew from underground to here, I believe you are hungry. These 5 people looked at each other. One of them, a sturdy man in armor, walked out. He raised his hand and placed it on his chest, then bent down slightly and saluted Chen Hao. He looked a little nervous and looked at Chen Hao nervously. Sir, I'm sorry, we didn't know that this island had an owner. Otherwise, we wouldn't dare to come up and disturb you. I hope you can show some leniency and let us go back. He looked nervous, his face was pale, and there was fear in his words, and his voice was trembling slightly. Chen Hao could notice that the man's hands were trembling slightly. It can be seen how nervous the man was. Chen Hao smiled. Don't be nervous, don't be afraid, sit down first. I have something to ask you. The man was startled. He subconsciously looked at Chen Hao. Seeing Chen Hao's kind smile, he subconsciously turned his head to look at his companions behind him. Those companions were also very nervous, but they didn't know how to deal with this situation. No one could give the man an answer. The man nodded slightly, then walked to the dining table and pulled a chair. When the chair was pulled, it rubbed against the ground. Click. The sound of the chair rubbing against the ground was particularly clear in this silent atmosphere. The man's face was pale and there was sweat on his forehead. He looked at Chen Hao carefully, observing the changes in Chen Hao's expression. For fear of provoking, Chen Hao was angry. Chen Hao looked at them with a smile, without any sign of anger. Seeing this, the man was slightly relieved and sat down slowly. The other 4 companions of the man also came over and sat down at the dining table. But Chen Hao could see that the expressions of these 5 people were very nervous. Many of the beasts that Chen Hao put outside for activities have reached the semi-emperor level. They should not recognize the appearance of those semi-emperor level beasts. However, they should recognize the snow girl and the snow monster. It is estimated that the snow girl and the snow monster scared them. Thinking of this, Chen Hao subconsciously hummed. Ah, suddenly, a scream frightened Chen Hao's hand holding the chopsticks and shook. He looked at the person who made the strange scream. Only the female adventurer's face turned pale, holding her head with her hands, lying on the dining table, she was trembling all over, her face was as pale as paper. Don't kill me, don't kill me. You can ask me to do anything, just don't kill me. She called out, her face pale. What's wrong with this woman? Chen Hao's mouth twitched. This guy scared me. Chen Hao looked at the man just now. The man's face turned pale. He sat upright, his eyes staring straight ahead. His resolute square face was as pale as paper at this moment, and his pupils were filled with deep fear. Chen Hao smiled. Don't be afraid, don't worry, I promise, we won't hurt you, let alone kill you, relax. When the 5 heard this, they all looked at Chen Hao. Chen Hao smiled, everything you see on this island is my beast. Without my order, they will not hurt you. Don't worry. Hearing this, the 5 looked at each other. Their expressions turned slightly better. The man who was obviously the captain swallowed his saliva and looked at Chen Hao cautiously. Sir, you just said you want to ask us, what do you want to know? Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled, don't worry, I asked my little animals to make breakfast. When breakfast comes, we can eat and talk. Chen Hao was not in a hurry. He was very leisurely. But the 5 people were pale at this moment. That look didn't look so good. Master, the dishes are served. Suddenly a voice came. Chen Hao looked over and saw that the high-level wood elves were carrying plates of dishes one after another, carrying various dishes into the restaurant. One by one, high-level wood elves entered the restaurant with dishes and placed them on the table. All of a sudden, the long oval wooden table was piled with fragrant meat and vegetables. Chen Hao looked at the 5 adventurers and said with a friendly smile, eat. The captain's face turned pale. He looked at Chen Hao. Well, sir, let's talk about your problem first. He was cautious, afraid of making Chen Hao unhappy. Chen Hao smiled, "Don't worry, eat first." "Okay." The captain smiled awkwardly. Watching the 5 people raise their shaking hands and start eating, Chen Hao had a smile on his face. It was rare for guests to come, so Chen Hao felt that he had to show his hospitality. Then, he slowly asked them some questions about the problems on the human side. Chen Hao either lived on Wolong Island or on the mysterious island. He didn't know much about what happened to humans. "I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 194. Chen Hao quietly looked at the 5 adventurers. There were 4 men and 1 woman. The captain should be a swordsman. He was wearing armor and carrying, no weapons. Chen Hao looked at the captain for a while, but found that the captain had no weapons. In addition to the captain, there was another man wearing heavy armor and a more burly figure. There was another man wearing light armor and carrying a bow and arrow. The 4th man was wearing a dark blue robe and a magician's hat. The last woman was the one who screamed in fear just now. She was wearing light armor and equipped with a dagger. She looked like an assassin. Reg said that there are many professions in this world, among which beast master, swordsman, and magician are the most popular professions. In addition to these 3, there are other professions. The man carrying a bow and arrow should be an archer, and the one wearing a blue robe should be a water magician. This woman should be an assassin, or a scout. Chen Hao retracted his gaze and looked at the captain. "Where are your weapons?" When the captain heard this, he came back to his senses. His face turned pale. He subconsciously looked at Chen Hao, and then looked at the big pig. Noticing the captain's gaze, Chen Hao looked at the big pig. The big pig smiled and said, "Sorry, master, when they first came in, I thought they were invaders, so I accidentally broke his sword." "No wonder." "Big pig, let the mysterious island stop first," Chen Hao said. "The land below the mysterious island should be the hometown of these 5 guests. Don't fly too far, so as not to cause trouble when they go back." The big pig nodded slightly. Chen Hao looked at the captain and smiled friendly. "What's your name?" The captain was startled, and he said in a panic, "Sir, just call me Borg." "Borg, where are you from?" "We are adventurers from the Taller Empire." "How does the Taller Empire compare to the Thunder Silver Empire?" The Thunder Silver Empire is one of the 3 major empires in the WAF continent, and the Taller Empire is a small empire, not as good as the Thunder Silver Empire." Hearing this, Chen Hao remembered. There are dozens of empires of different sizes in the WAF continent. Obviously, the Taller Empire is also one of the many small empires. Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows and showed a friendly smile. "Is there anything fun in the Taller Empire?" Now Chen Hao has been watching the changes in his beasts these days. Apart from that, there is nothing else to do. Since he has come to a human empire, Chen Hao is a little interested in traveling a little. Borg was slightly startled, and he subconsciously looked at his companions. They never expected that Chen Hao would ask such a question. Borg looked at Chen Hao. "It's fun, there are beauties in the tavern in Lita City, the capital of the Taller Empire." "Beauties?" Chen Hao's heart moved. Could it be that kind of service? However, those beauties are nothing compared to the sisters around the adults. Borg's forehead was sweating and his face was pale. Seeing Borg's nervous look, Chen Hao subconsciously turned his head to look at Yaoguang Emperor Butterfly standing next to him. I saw Yaoguang Emperor Butterfly frowning, and the little face that was always gentle seemed to be covered with a layer of frost at this moment, and her eyes were staring at Borg coldly. Obviously, Xiadi didn't like what Borg just said. Xiadi caught Chen Hao's gaze, looked at Borg, and said coldly, "My master just asked you where there are fun places in the Empire. But you told my master about that kind of enemy. This is simply a blasphemy to my master. I have the supreme noble gene, How can I play in such a disgusting way like those guys who are as low level as beasts? You are so stupid and ignorant. Hearing this, Chen Hao looked at Xiaodi's angry look. Chen Hao was slightly stunned. What are you saying, as if I am a saint? For some reason, I have no interest in that aspect. Chen Hao looked at the world in front of him, and looked at the 5 people sitting at the dining table trembling because of Xiaodi's anger. Chen Hao always felt that he was out of tune with this world. Or, it is a feeling of being high above. It's like a god, looking down on all living things. Because of this feeling, there is no interest. Is this the price of immortality? Thinking of this, Chen Hao felt a sense of both laughter and tears, and said to himself in his heart, it's as if I'm really a god. Chen Hao came back to his senses and looked at the 5 people. He found that their faces were as pale as paper. Obviously, they were frightened by Xiaodi's anger. Chen Hao raised his hand and signaled Xiaodi to stop talking. Xiaodi saw that it understood what Chen Hao meant, took a step back, and retreated behind Chen Hao. The 5 people also noticed Chen Hao's actions, and looked at Chen Hao one by one, with fear in their eyes. Chen Hao put down his hand, looked at them, and said with a smile, don't worry, since I asked you to answer, you can answer as you want, I won't blame you. Seeing Chen Hao's friendly smile, they were slightly relieved. Borg looked at Chen Hao cautiously, that, sir, the questions you want to ask have been asked, can we leave? Chen Hao blinked his eyes and smiled and said, I think I haven't finished asking. Don't worry. Borg showed a smile that was uglier than crying, sir, please ask. For Borg, it would probably feel like time has passed very slowly. Chen Hao smiled and said, actually, I have an idea recently. Borg was stunned, and he looked at Chen Hao. Chen Hao smiled and said, you say, if I want to rule the taller empire, what do I need to do? Borg was shocked, he looked at Chen Hao blankly, with disbelief in his eyes. Borg subconsciously looked at his companions. The 4 companions all had some disbelief in their eyes. Borg swallowed his saliva and subconsciously looked at Chen Hao. Chen Hao smiled and said leisurely, don't be so nervous, I just have nothing to do, so I just ask casually. You just treat it as a chat, it's nothing, relax. Borg looked at Chen Hao's smiling face, he said carefully, we are adventurers, we don't participate in the affairs of the empire. Hearing this, Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows. That's right, the adventurers are just a civilian organization, and they have little to do with the empire itself. As adventurers, it's normal for them not to know. But Borg suddenly spoke. Chen Hao heard this and looked at Borg. Borg looked at Chen Hao, the taller empire, the upper echelons are corrupt, and the people living in this empire are like livestock. Captain, the handsome man with a magician's hat next to him, reminded. Borg came back to his senses, he closed his mouth and was silent. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 195. Chen Hao looked at Borg. He stretched his eyebrows slightly and said with a smile, Big Pig, send the guests back. Yes, Big Pig responded, then walked to the door, looked at the 5 adventurers, smiled and said, 5 of you, please follow me. The 5 Borgs came to their senses, and they stood up one by one. Except for Borg, the other 4 walked out the door as if they were being amnesty. Borg stood there. He took a step towards the door, but as soon as he took a step, he stopped, turned around, looked back at Chen Hao, put his hand on his chest, and bowed to Chen Hao. Thank you for not killing me, sir. Seeing Borg's solemn look, Chen Hao smiled and nodded, go ahead. The 5 adventurers were led away from the palace by the Big Pig. Chen Hao stood up, walked to the balcony, and looked at the backs of the 5 people who followed Dazu away. There's trouble. It seems that the people living in the Taril Empire are not happy either. However, Chen Hao knew his position very well. In his last life, he was an ordinary office worker. In this life, he just obtained some plugins and raised some beasts that were stronger than ordinary monsters. Want to save an empire by yourself, then rule that empire and take care of the civilians of that empire? Huh, I can't do that. And that would be too much trouble. Sure enough, I'd better take it easy, continue to stay on the mysterious island, and raise my little animals. Thinking about it, Chen Hao withdrew his gaze and walked back on his own. On the side, the Yaoguang Emperor Butterfly looked at Chen Hao's back, its eyes glowing with luster. That evening, Master wants to rule the Riddle Empire. The speaker was a handsome man with dragon horns and wearing a luxurious robe with blue scales. The man looked at the Yaoguang Emperor Butterfly with a trace of inquiry in his eyes. This man is the little white dragon who has evolved to the Emperor stage. Emperor period 1000 years of dragon movement. A snake turns into a dragon after 1000 years, a dragon turns into a horned dragon after 100 years, and a horned dragon turns into a walking dragon after 1000 years. Although Xinglong is in the Emperor stage, he already has the strength comparable to that of a monster in the God General stage. Yaoguang Emperor Dai nodded slightly, yes. The little white dragon stretched its eyebrows and said calmly, my master raised me. Ever since I was an alien egg, he has kept me by his side, given me food, and given me the Emperor's core, but I have never been able to help him of any busyness. Since the master wants to rule the Little Empire, let me handle this matter. Hearing this, Yaoguang Emperor Dai nodded slightly. The little white dragon's body turned into white light, and the white light flew high into the sky and turned into a huge walking dragon. The walking dragon swam on the clouds and disappeared from the sight of the Glory Emperor Butterfly in the blink of an eye. Time flies and it's the next morning. Owner. Dalong and Erlong were released from the book by Chen Hao. The current big dragon and the second dragon have evolved to the God General stage. God General period Extreme Ice Dragon General. God General period Shui Ning Long General. Chen Hao looked at the newly evolved dragon in front of him and said with a smile, is there anything special about the Divine General stage? When Dalong heard this, he showed a respectful smile, Master, I now have 3 bodies, one is the current human body, the other is the previous dragon body, and there is another. As he spoke, Dalong's body glowed. The light covered the dragon's body, and the dragon's body began to change. The white light spreads. There are 2 more dragon horns on the big dragon's forehead, and the dragon horns glow with a blue halo. It was covered in armor, which was made of dragon scales and glowed blue. The exposed arms are also covered with the unique scales of the ice dragon. There was a blue light in its hand, which looked like a trident made of ice crystals. This posture looks very much like those generals in the divine realm. Dalong looked at Chen Hao and said with a smile, this is my divine general form. Before, I couldn't exert my full strength in my human form. But now that I have this body shape, I can use this body to exert my full strength, all the power. Hearing this, Chen Hao hummed, it just feels like that. The dragon was startled, and its smile turned bitter, Master, compared to you, this is indeed the case. Let's not talk about this anymore, Chen Hao said as he took out 3 cards from the book. Puppy Stage Ice Dragon Cub. Hunger level, 100%. Thirst level, 100%. Taming degree, 100%. Puppy Stage Water Dragon Cub. Puppy Stage Ice Dragon Cub. These 3 dragon eggs have hatched. Change. The 3 cards turned into 3 dragon cubs and appeared in front of Chen Hao. When these 3 dragon cubs appeared, the eyes of Dalong and Erlong both lit up. After the 3 little guys came out, they looked at me, then at you, and then looked around with confusion in their eyes. Suddenly, one of the ice dragon cubs saw Chen Hao, and its eyes lit up slightly, Master. It happily ran to Chen Hao, raised its little head, and looked at Chen Hao. When the other two little guys saw it, they also moved towards Chen Hao. Master, Master. Chen Hao was slightly startled. Can you speak so soon? Under normal circumstances, whether it is a monster or a monster, it should only be able to speak after reaching the Beast King stage. Could it be because they are giant dragons, or is it because the parents of these three little guys are holy beasts? Chen Hao smiled, reached out and touched their little heads, and said with a smile, "Okay, stop calling. If you call your parents again, they will be jealous." Mom and Dad, the three little guys blinked. Chen Hao looked at De Long and Er Long, who were smiling and loving. The three little guys followed Chen Hao's line of sight and looked at De Long and Er Long. At first glance, the three little guys' eyes lit up. Mom and Dad. They called and trotted towards De Long and Er Long. De Long looked at them and smiled. He looked at Er Long. The two guys' bodies glowed white. In the blink of an eye, they turned into two giant dragons. They probably made their bodies smaller in order to interact with the children. Dad, Mom. Ha De Long smiled and rubbed the little guys with his dragon head. Er Long looked at the children with love. Chen Hao looked at the happy family scene in front of him, with a smile on his face and a sense of satisfaction in his heart. The little guys he raised finally had children. Watching them grow, watching them lay eggs, watching the eggs hatch. This sense of accomplishment is great. Chen Hao opened the book. Yesterday, he harvested an incredible beast, and I wonder how it is now. Infant Bright Boy. Seeing this name, Chen Hao couldn't help but laugh. Bright Boy. When Chitaya was a dark girl in her childhood, this guy is a bright boy. The name is not that important. What Chen Hao cares about most is the degree of taming. After all, gods are not ordinary monsters. Whether it can be tamed or not, Chen Hao is not sure in his heart. Infant Bright Boy. Taming degree, 100%. Seeing this, Chen Hao had a smile on his face. Done. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 196. Chen Hao took out the card from the card slot of the book. Change. The card turned into a figure. The moment the figure appeared, bright light illuminated the surroundings. Chen Hao felt his eyes turning white. The white light dispersed. Chen Hao saw a boy who looked to be 11 or 12 years old standing in front of him. It was wearing golden clothes and had long golden hair. Under the long hair was a handsome young face. It slowly opened its eyes, revealing a pair of golden eyes. The impression given by Satya is dark and gloomy. The young man in front of him gave Chen Hao the feeling of being holy, bright and energetic. The god of light is the god of light. After it opened its eyes, it raised its face and looked at Chen Hao. Seeing Chen Hao, his handsome and delicate face showed no signs of movement. It raised its hand, put it on its chest, then bent slightly towards Chen Hao, saluted, and then said, "Master." Not as happy and joyful as Satya, Badra, the god of light, gives off a quiet type of impression. Chen Hao smiled, "How are you resting?" When Balder heard this, it said, "Thanks to the master, Balder feels that his body has recovered a lot. Although he is not at his peak yet, he can recover so much in such a short time, which is enough to surprise Balder." "That's good," Chen Hao said. "By the way, you and Satya seem to have some conflicts." Badra was startled and nodded slightly. "Yes, more than 500,000 years ago, Satya created the demon race, and I created the light race. The other gods also created their own races. We spent together. A lot of effort has been put into cultivating these races, teaching them various survival abilities, and helping them build civilization. We take care of the race we created like children, and watch the children grow up little by little. but more than 30,000 years ago, Satya launched a massacre plan to exterminate divinity, intending to kill all races in the world until only the demon race remained. For this reason, I, Rose, Isis, and Gaia worked together to seal Satya, but Satya was too powerful. It destroyed my godhead with a death wish, and also seriously injured 3 other gods. Badra spoke slowly and steadily. This guy has a completely different personality from Satya. Chen Hao could clearly feel that Badra should have a character that accepts death. However, what Badra said and what Satya said were basically the same. The only problem is that Satya has the mentality of a little girl playing games, and does not regard the life of the race created by the gods as life at all. Badra is a serious person, while Satya is a playful guy who loves to play so much that he can treat everything as a toy. The personalities of these 2 guys are destined to lead to a fight. Chen Hao smiled, stretched out his hand, and touched Badra's head. Balder closed his eyes. Chen Hao said with a smile, "Let the past be in the past. Now that I'm back, you don't need to continue fighting." Hearing this, Badra's eyes glowed. He raised his face and looked at Chen Hao, "With a master here and a master who upholds justice, I don't think Satya dares to do such nonsense anymore." "Well." Chen Hao nodded slightly. Chen Hao opened the book and looked at the card slot where Satya was previously placed. Half-Emperor period the Dark Empress. This little guy has evolved again. Chen Hao took out the card. Change. The figure of card Satya appeared, and the moment it appeared, darkness enveloped the surroundings in an instant. Chen Hao felt his eyes go dark. Badra frowned slightly. It was obvious that it had realized something. Satya's figure appeared in front of Chen Hao. Satya wears a luxurious robe and has a white face with black eyeshadow and lips. Looks cool. The corners of its mouth were raised and it looked at Chen Hao. As soon as she saw Chen Hao, Satya's eyes lit up and a smile appeared on her face. "Master." Chen Hao nodded slightly and said with a smile, "Look at the people around you." Satya was startled, and it turned its face to look at Badra beside it. Badra frowned and stared at Satya, with a trace of anger on the face of the handsome young man. The smile on Satya's face froze, and she suddenly laughed out loud, "Ha ha." "Badra, don't be angry," Satya said with a smile. 30,000 years ago, I let the demons invade the Light tribe. This is indeed the case. However, I killed half of your race, and you also killed. There are quite a few demon clan members, aren't they? Besides, you shattered my godhead 30,000 years ago, so don't be angry. Now that the master is back, our memories are also back. Since we are all created by the master, we are all companions. Don't be angry. Don't be angry." Satya grinned broadly, looking careless. This scene is somewhat similar to Fire Phoenix. No wonder Satya and Fire Phoenix play together. Badra glanced at Satya, it ignored Satya's actions at all, and looked at Chen Hao. Chen Hao noticed Badra's gaze and said with a smile, "Satya is the oldest ancient god and can also be considered your sister. I have to say that it lacks a brain and does some outrageous things. As my younger brother, it should be helped to think more." "Master." Upon hearing this, Satya looked at Chen Hao with grievance. Chen Hao smiled, "Farewell, master, you don't even know how outrageous the things you did before are." Ugh, Satya puffed out her cheeks. Badra's eyes lit up slightly, and he nodded in agreement. Indeed, Satya's brain circuit is indeed incomprehensible. It turns out that he is missing a muscle. Looking at Badra's expression, Chen Hao said with a smile, "Light hates darkness, and darkness hates light, because you two are two extremes." After hearing this, Badra and Satya looked at Chen Hao together. Chen Hao said softly, "However, where there is light, there is darkness, and where there is darkness, there is light. You two are inseparable." Badra looked at Chen Hao. Badra's eyes were shining. Satya's eyes were filled with admiration. He noticed the way these two gods looked at him. Chen Hao felt goosebumps all over his body. The words he said were actually learned from certain TV series. He didn't know whether they were correct or not. He just learned and sold them now. Chen Hao felt a little embarrassed when he saw these two gods looking at him in admiration. Badra nodded slightly and said seriously, what the master said made Bader feel suddenly enlightened. In the past, Badra thought about beating Satya to pieces and sealing her forever. Now listen to the master with these words. Badra understood how stupid he had been. Master, you are indeed the master. Bader looked at Chen Hao with admiration in his eyes. Chen Hao smiled, trying his best to make his smile look majestic. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 197. Badal, I'm training some pets recently and need some God Lord cores. Chen Hao looked at Bader, you are the Lord of Light, you should have some God Lord cores, right? Hearing this, Bader nodded slightly. God Lord core is one of the cores for making God Lord angels. When we fought with Shataya before, the angels also participated in the battle. Many God Lord angels were sacrificed in the battle, and those cores were taken back. Speaking of this, Bader paused and looked at Chen Hao. Now those things are placed in the Temple of Light. If the master needs them, I can take Shataya to get them. Chen Hao nodded slightly, yes. Chen Hao looked at Shataya. Satya noticed Chen Hao's sight and smiled, leave it to me and Bader. Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled, then you two go. Speaking of this, Chen Hao reminded, Satya, remember, you are the elder sister, don't make trouble for Bader when I'm not around. Satya smiled slightly, don't worry, master, Satya, am not that kind of stingy person. Chen Hao nodded slightly. Satya looked at Bader and said with a smile, let's go, I will take you there with me by teleportation. Bader looked at Satya, then looked at Chen Hao, raised his hand and placed it in front of his chest, and saluted Chen Hao slightly, master, then Bader will go with Satya first. Chen Hao smiled and nodded. Bader and Satya disappeared together. Looking at the place where the two guys disappeared, Chen Hao's eyebrows stretched slightly. Goddess of darkness, God of light, I never thought that I would use God as a beast. Chen Hao shook his head and stopped thinking about it. He released all the beasts as usual and let them play by themselves. And Chen Hao went back to the palace. Chen Hao lay lazily on the bed, looking at the unfamiliar ceiling in front of him. Now there is still some distance from the endless cave. Shataya is still in the half-emperor stage, and there is still some distance from the peak. When Shataya reaches the main god stage, and then enters the endless cave to hunt vein stones, the big wolf and others can be evolved to the main god stage. But during this time, it is a bit boring. Chen Hao felt the soft quilt and looked at the ceiling above. Is it not good for me to do this? Chen Hao, who had nothing to do, had no entertainment, so he could only lie on the bed. Although this bed is comfortable to lie on, it feels a little bad. Dong dong. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Hearing the knock, Chen Hao looked at the door. Come in. The door was pushed back. A figure walked in from outside the door. It was the little skeleton. The little skeleton was the name Chen Hao gave it. The little skeleton has now evolved to the God General stage. God General stage. Golden Skeleton God General. The Golden Skeleton God General, a dark attribute monster, has the ability to comprehend a new sword skill, a special move, self-created sword skill Earth Splitting. As the Golden Skeleton God General, the little skeleton wore a black robe with golden rose patterns and gold edges. It wore a long sword at its waist, and the scabbard looked particularly exquisite. It also wore a noble hat on its skull, and its entire body was hidden under the black robe and hat, revealing only a pair of black hole pupils and the red light in the pupils. It also wore a golden rose ring on its exposed finger. It exuded a noble, vicissitudes and ancient aura. If ordinary people saw the aura of this thing, they would be scared to death. Of course, as the person who trained it, in Chen Hao's eyes, this little guy will always be a weak little skeleton. It walked in from the door, with a respectful look, raised its hands, placed them in front of its chest, and bowed slightly to Chen Hao, "Master." Chen Hao smiled, "It's the little skeleton, why did you suddenly come to me, what's the matter?" The little skeleton lowered its head slightly when it heard it, "Master, the little skeleton has been comprehending new sword skills recently, but the new sword skills have never been able to break through, and I always feel that something is missing. The little skeleton wants to leave the mysterious island and go out to train and find an opportunity to break through the comprehension." Hearing this, Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows, "Leave the mysterious island, where to go?" The little skeleton said, "I heard that there is a sword god in the WAF continent, and the sword skills that you gave me were also created by the sword god. I want to learn from the sword god and see if I can make a breakthrough." "Sword god? Sword god, I know." Chen Hao retracted his gaze and looked at the ceiling, "He can be considered my old friend, but he probably can't spar with you, he's too weak. However, if it's about sword skills, he can indeed give you some guidance." As he said that, Chen Hao slowly stood up. The little skeleton noticed Chen Hao standing up, and its eyes condensed slightly. The slightly red eyes trembled slightly, and its expression was a little nervous. Chen Hao sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the little skeleton standing in front of him with his head down. Chen Hao smiled, "Don't be nervous, relax." Hearing this, the little skeleton relaxed a little. These little guys, when they were young, they wanted to pester themselves when they saw me. But after growing up, they would always be nervous when talking to me. Maybe it's because I've grown up and have more things to think about. Chen Hao watched the little skeleton relax, and he smiled and said, "With your current strength, there will be no danger in the VAF continent. Okay, go ahead, the VAF continent is very big, and you have grown up, it's time to go out and explore." The little skeleton's eyes condensed slightly, and it raised its face to look at Chen Hao, "Master." Chen Hao smiled, "Don't worry too much, I train you just to watch you grow up. I am very happy that you have the heart to stay with me, but I want to see you live freely. You are now strong enough to protect yourself, and you can go out to play by yourself." When the little skeleton heard it, it looked at Chen Hao with its red eyes, and it didn't say anything. It raised its hands, put them in front of its chest, and saluted Chen Hao, "As long as the master needs it, the little skeleton will risk his life, and it will not hesitate." Chen Hao was happy, "Okay, there is no need to be so serious between you and me, go and play." The little skeleton nodded, then turned and left. Chen Hao looked at the back of the little skeleton, which seemed a little huge under the support of the black robe. He stretched his eyebrows and smiled. In fact, in the past 2 days, Chen Hao also considered that the beasts were too leisurely recently, and they looked like they had nothing to do. He also thought about letting them move around, but he didn't know how to do it. Now that the little skeleton took the initiative to bring it up, Chen Hao was happy. Chen Hao got up and walked to the balcony on his own. Through the balcony, Chen Hao could see the little skeleton wearing a hat and lowering his head, walking out of the palace. Looking at the figure of the little skeleton, Chen Hao smiled. Huh! Suddenly, there was a sound of wind. Chen Hao raised his head and looked. He saw a huge monster blocking half of the sky. "I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 198. God General Stage 10,000 Years Dragon. This thing was a 1,000-year dragon yesterday, and it's a 10,000-year dragon today. It's a little bigger, but there's no other change, Chen Hao muttered. The huge dragon's body glowed with white light. The light shrank into 2 balls of light, flew in front of Chen Hao, and turned into a human form. When the white light dispersed, 2 figures appeared in front of Chen Hao. One was Xiaobai's human form. Xiaobai's human form is still in line with human aesthetics. This is a handsome young man with an oriental dragon horn on his forehead, who looks elegant. And the other one is a woman. The woman was wearing a red robe embroidered with red rose petals. A face with a smile, enchanting and charming. This thing is the flower demon that has evolved to the God General stage. God General stage peerless flower fairy. Xiaobai looked at Chen Hao, raised his hands, bowed to Chen Hao, saluted slightly, and said elegantly, "Master." The flower fairy also saluted slightly to Chen Hao and said with a smile, "Master." Chen Hao crossed his arms and said with a smile, "Xiaobai came to see me, what's the matter?" Xiaobai raised his head and looked at Chen Hao. "I heard from Sister Xiadi that the master wants to rule the taller empire, so Xiaobai went to the taller empire these 2 days. The king of the taller empire has been killed by me, and the other ministers of the little empire have also been controlled by the flower fairy. Now the taller empire has announced to the whole region that the master has been made the new king." Speaking of this, Xiaobai looked at Chen Hao. "Now master, you are the new king of the little empire." Chen Hao's smile froze, and his brain was a little confused. "Wait, what did you say?" Chen Hao looked at Xiaobai. "I am the new king now." Xiaobai nodded slightly, "Yes." As he said that, Xiaobai took out 3 cards from his sleeve pocket and handed them to Chen Hao. Chen Hao was slightly startled. He reached out to take it and looked at it. Props crown of the king of the little empire. Props scepter of the king of the little empire. Props royal robe of the king of the little empire. Xiaobai explained, "Now all the nobles and civilians of the little empire have regarded you as their king. You have these 3 tokens on your body, and you are the king of the little empire." Hearing this, Chen Hao's mouth twitched. He turned his head to look at Xiadi, who followed him silently beside him. Today's Xiadi has evolved to the Emperor stage. Emperor stage Radiant Emperor Butterfly. Xiadi looks more holy and beautiful when she is in the Emperor stage. Seeing Chen Hao, Xiadi smiled. This guy misunderstood his thoughts and thought that he really wanted to rule the little empire, and even told Xiaobai about it. However, Chen Hao retracted his gaze and recalled his performance the day before yesterday. It was no wonder that he misunderstood. Xiaobai was also cruel. He killed the king directly and even knew how to use the flower fairy's minotaur magic to control humans. Chen Hao adjusted his emotions and smiled to make himself look calmer. He looked at Xiaobai and said with a smile, "Xiadi, you misunderstood. I have no interest in ruling the little empire." Xiaobai was slightly startled and looked at Xiadi. Xiadi was also confused. "But you killed the king. If no one becomes the king of the little empire will probably become very chaotic." Speaking of this, Chen Hao looked at Xiaobai. "Xiaobai, do you want to give it a try?" Xiaobai was slightly startled. "Master, this." Chen Hao smiled and said, "You are not interested in this." Xiaobai nodded slightly, and it looked at Chen Hao seriously. "I want to stay with the master." Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled. "Well, Xiaobai, I will give you a task." When Xiaobai heard it, it looked serious and put its hands on its chest. Chen Hao looked at Xiaobai and said with a smile, "I want you to be the king of the little empire. I can give you 10 years. I want the little empire to become a powerful empire. I want the lives of the civilians in it to no longer be in dire straits. I want you to create an empire that values the people." Xiaobai was stunned. "Master." Chen Hao smiled and said, "This time, don't misunderstand my meaning. Your personal strength does not represent the strength of the empire. This task is very difficult." Hearing this, Xiaobai looked solemn. Xiaobai understands. Chen Hao looked at the 3 cards in front of him. Transform. The card materialized into a physical object. Chen Hao handed the materialized card to Xiaobai. When Xiaobai saw it, it knelt on one knee, raised its hands, and looked solemn. Looking at Xiaobai's solemn posture, Chen Hao was slightly startled. Chen Hao smiled and handed the thing to it. Xiaobai took it solemnly, then slowly stood up and looked at Chen Hao. Xiaobai will definitely complete the task. Chen Hao nodded slightly, and he looked at Wushu and Flower Fairy. Chen Hao smiled and said, "Be a companion to Xiaobai, and also help it." When Wushu and Flower Fairy heard it, it smiled, "Flower Fairy, obey your command." Xiaobai and Wushu and Flower Fairy turned into two balls of light and flew into the sky. Under Chen Hao's gaze, a giant white dragon that was hundreds of meters long and covered the sky appeared in the sky. The white dragon swam, and its silver five-clawed dragon claws stepped, rolling up the clouds in the air, and soon disappeared from Chen Hao's sight. Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows. "I don't know what this little empire can become from the empire in dire straits in Borg's mouth with the help of the white dragon and the flower fairy." Chen Hao was looking forward to it. The flower fairy has unique minotaur magic, but Shataya also knows this magic. It would be a good choice to let the flower fairy help Xiaobai. Master Xiaobai and the flower fairy had just left. A voice came from the side. Hearing this voice, Chen Hao looked at the source of the voice. The figures of Shataya and Bader appeared in front of him. Shataya was looking at him with a smile on her face, while Bader was still as expressionless as before. Bader looked at Chen Hao and bowed slightly to Chen Hao. "Master, we are back." As he said that, Bader took out a card from his sleeve pocket, then held the card with both hands and handed it to Chen Hao respectfully. His movements were very formal, which was indeed the opposite of the carefree Shataya. Chen Hao reached out and took it. Props Light Collection Card Book. Balder looked at Chen Hao. "These are some Emperor cores I collected before. In addition to the Emperor core of Light, the Emperor core, the God General core, and the God King core, there are also some Dark Emperor cores, God General cores, and God King cores." Satya was startled, and it looked at Balder. "Why are you collecting these?" Badal said slowly, "These dark magic crystals were collected when we destroyed the Dark Domain and hunted the Dark Soldiers. At that time, I collected these things to prevent Shataya from using these magic elements to quickly revive." Hey, you stinky boy," Shataya's eyes widened when he heard it. "You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 199. Shataya. Chen Hao said. Shataya was startled. It looked at Chen Hao, then looked at Bader, and said with a smile, "Forget it, it's all over, we are brothers in the future." Chen Hao retracted his gaze and looked at the card collection book in his hand. With these Emperor cores given by Bader, plus the Emperor core of the God of Fire, the problem of the evolution of the Light and Dark Flame beasts to the God King stage is solved. The next thing to do is to cultivate them first. Chen Hao seemed to think of something, and subconsciously looked at Bader. "Badal, how is your relationship with other main gods? For example, the main god of fire Hephaestus has a good relationship with Shataya, so relying on this relationship, it is easy to ask the main god of fire Hephaestus for things like the Flame Emperor core. In addition to the main god of fire, Shataya's relationship with other main gods is very ordinary. It is not easy to rely on this to ask other main gods for something. But now with Bader, maybe you can try." When Balder heard this, he raised his head and looked at Chen Hao. "Relationship? He, master, I know this. Balder's relationship with other gods is very ordinary," Shataya said. Chen Hao looked at Shataya. Shataya said with a smile, "The reason why Balder could unite with other main gods to beat me up was because other main gods wanted to beat me up, so they could join forces. If it were normal, Balder would have a very ordinary relationship with those main gods and would not interact at all. Badal, this guy is actually very annoying. No matter what he does, He always looks serious. He also sets some rules for himself and his light tribe, and his light tribe strictly follows those rules. Because of those rules, his light tribe often conflicts with other races, and has fought with those races many times because of these rules. Because of these, other main gods don't like Balder very much. After that, the light tribe had too many conflicts with other races and was excluded. As a result, they are now in seclusion. Speaking of this, Shataya looked at Balder with a smug look on her face and said with a smile, "This guy is doing about the same as me." Chen Hao looked at Shataya's smug and gloating expression, and said, "This guy is doing about the same as me." People who don't know would think that Shataya is doing very well. Chen Hao sighed in his heart, "Shataya, what a shameless thing. It seems that it is impossible to find other gods through Bader to get the Emperor core. Forget it." Chen Hao touched the back of his head. "Anyway, Shataya's strength will reach the peak in a few days, so let it continue to hunt the heavenly generals in the divine domain." Thinking of this, Chen Hao looked at Shataya, just like before, "Take the Fire Phoenix and others to get some cores back." Master Bader suddenly said. Chen Hao was startled, and he looked at Bader. Bader looked at Chen Hao, and he said seriously, "I heard from my subordinates that Shataya has been active in various divine domains recently, killing heavenly soldiers and generals to collect various magic crystals. I didn't know what was going on before, but now I know. If the master needs magic crystals, I can go to those main gods and ask them for them. After all, it is what the master needs, I believe they will give it." Chen Hao blinked and looked at Bader's serious face. Chen Hao touched his nose, "You can try it?" Chen Hao smiled, "I don't like fighting and killing either. You can help me talk about it?" When Bader heard it, he nodded slightly. Chen Hao looked at Shataya and said with a smile, "Go with it?" Shataya smiled and nodded, her black eyes full of interest. Probably because she realized that she was going to meet those old friends before, so Shataya is now very excited. Chen Hao smiled and said, "Remember, don't fight casually." "Oh." Shataya's smile disappeared. "Of course, they are not allowed to bully us." Chen Hao smiled again. The smile on Shataya's face reappeared. "Then, Master, we're going," Shataya said with a smile. Chen Hao nodded slightly. The figures of Shataya and Bader disappeared on the spot. Looking at the place where the two guys disappeared, Chen Hao silently retracted his sight, stood in front of the balcony, and looked at the mysterious island in front of him. "I don't know why, but I always feel a little tired," Chen Hao muttered. In fact, he didn't do anything, but he felt a little tired, which was mental fatigue. Suddenly, there was a light beside him. A warmth filled Chen Hao's body. Chen Hao looked at his body, which was glowing. The warmth filled his body, and it was warm, and the mental fatigue seemed to be soothed at this moment. Chen Hao looked at Zayadi beside him, and saw that Zayadi was glowing all over. It was obviously Zayadi's magic. Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows. Zayadi said softly, "Master, will this make you feel more comfortable?" Chen Hao smiled, "It's okay." Zayadi lowered her head slightly, her expression was apologetic, "Master, I'm sorry." Chen Hao looked at Zayadi's expression, and he stretched his eyebrows, "What's wrong?" Zayadi lowered her head, her expression was nervous and uneasy, "I misunderstood the master's meaning, and caused Zaya to do something wrong. So this is it." Chen Hao retracted his sight and looked forward. As the wind blew over him, he said, "It's okay. The final result is good. Ziobai, Huaxian, these two little guys have nothing to do recently. It's good to let them go out and experience it." Speaking of this, Chen Hao looked at Zayadi, with a gentle smile on his face, and said with a smile, "If Zayadi also wants to go out for a walk, it's okay." When Zayadi heard it, its little face changed slightly, it knelt down on one knee in panic, lowered its head, "Master, Zayadi knows that I'm wrong, Please don't drive Xiadi away, Xiadi won't do it again in the future. Chen Hao was stunned. He raised his hand and touched the back of his head. When talking to the same person, some people are easy to communicate with, while some people are not so easy to communicate with. Chen Hao smiled bitterly and said with a smile, "Don't be so nervous, I know what you think, just follow me like Xiaoying in the future." When Xiadi heard it, it breathed a sigh of relief. Looking at Xiadi's posture, Chen Hao knew why it was so scared. It was different from the little skeleton who wanted to explore sword skills and wanted to leave the mysterious island. What Xiadi and Xiaoying wanted was to stay with Chen Hao and help him solve the problems around him. For them, leaving Chen Hao was the biggest punishment. After Chen Hao realized this, he no longer wanted Xiadi to go out for training. Chen Hao retracted his gaze and went back to the house. I don't know if Shataya and Bader can get the God King core of other attributes. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 200. Back in the room, Chen Hao lay on the bed, looking at the ceiling. A feeling of loneliness came over him. Strange, there are so many beasts around me, why do I feel lonely? Chen Hao closed his eyes. Distance. Yes, Chen Hao could clearly feel the distance between the beasts and himself. After all, he was their master. Since he called himself the master, there was naturally a distance. Because of the distance, they could not understand what he was thinking. Just like Xiadi would misunderstand him. But it's normal. Chen Hao slowly opened his eyes. As long as you are a human, you will feel lonely, that's it. Suddenly, Chen Hao felt a slight warmth in his arm, and there was a touch, it was the softness of animal hair. Chen Hao turned his head and saw a fluffy black rabbit, looking at him with its foreears erect. Chen Hao smiled, reached out and picked it up, and put it in front of him. He turned sideways, lying on his side, and reached out to touch its rabbit ears. Chen Hao looked at its closed eyes. Chen Hao knew that Xiaoying felt his low mood, so he wanted to comfort himself. Don't worry, your master is not so delicate. Chen Hao smiled. Xiaoying opened her eyes and looked at Chen Hao. Chen Hao took his hand back, and he looked at the ceiling above. In a few days, Shataya will reach the Lord God stage, and then she can enter the Endless Cave. I don't know what those creatures in the Endless Cave that Shataya mentioned are like. King Lu said that those creatures are a kind of non-living things that look like living things. What kind of existence is it? To be honest, Chen Hao is quite curious. I am looking forward to entering the Endless Cave as soon as possible. However, I look forward to it. If I want to go in, I still have to be a Lord God with Shataya. Otherwise, it will be a waste. Before Shataya is promoted to the Lord God stage, let's promote other beasts to the God King stage. Time flies, and it is afternoon that day. Master, suddenly, a voice came. Chen Hao slowly opened his eyes. Looking at the familiar ceiling, Chen Hao slowly stood up. Did you fall asleep by accident? Chen Hao turned his head and looked at the source of the voice. I saw Shataya standing not far away with Bader. Shataya had a smile on her face. Master, it's done. Hearing this, Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows. Did it? Shataya's cold and mature face was covered with a smile, and said, Master, have you forgotten? You asked Bader and I to go to other main gods to ask for the Emperor core, and now I have it. As she said, Shataya took out a card and handed it to Chen Hao. Chen Hao took it and looked at it. Props Light Collection Card Book. Chen Hao raised his face and looked at Shataya. Success. Chen Hao didn't come back to his senses. Before, Chen Hao did ask Shataya and Bader to ask other main gods for the Emperor core, but in fact Chen Hao was just trying his luck. The relationship between those main gods and Shataya is basically just hatred, and their relationship with Balder is also average. Chen Hao had no hope that they would ask for it this time, but unexpectedly, they succeeded. This made Chen Hao a little unresponsive. Shataya hummed. Chen Hao looked at the card in his hand, and then looked at Shataya. How did you do it? As he said, Chen Hao looked at Balder, who closed his eyes slightly and looked silent. Shataya smiled and said, Badal has a good relationship with them, so I let Balder and the others talk. At first, they disagreed and said a lot of nonsense. Then I said that if they don't agree, I will fight them to the death when I restore Balder and I to our peak state, and then they agreed. Hearing this, Chen Hao opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he didn't know how to say it. Chen Hao subconsciously looked at Balder. With Balder's personality, it is estimated that he will reason with those main gods and persuade them through words. Obviously, this trick had no effect. Instead, it was Shataya's way of whoever has the bigger fist has the right that convinced the main gods. Gods are also afraid of bigger fists. No wonder, after Balder came over, he closed his eyes and said nothing. I guess he didn't know how to describe these things. Chen Hao adjusted his mood and said with a smile, Okay, you two have worked hard today. There is nothing to do next, go and play. When Shataya heard it, it looked at Balder. Balder opened his eyes, saluted Chen Hao, and then turned and left. Shataya followed Balder. Badal, come on, let's go to Hefei's to have a drink. No. Hey, it's rare that we get together. No. Has no one ever told you that you're a loser? No. You, tisk tisk tisk, no wonder you asked them for the Emperor core, but they didn't give it to you. Shataya suddenly seemed to think of something, it stopped and turned to look at Chen Hao. By the way, Master. Chen Hao was looking at the card collection book, and when he heard Shataya's words, he looked at Shataya. Shataya looked at Chen Hao and said with a smile, We went to the Storm God realm, and the Storm Lord was not there, so we turned the Storm God realm over and found a lot of Emperor core cards. I put the cards in the card collection book. Hearing this, Chen Hao's heart moved. By the way, Ross is still in his book. Chen Hao nodded slightly. Shataya is currently in the half-emperor stage, but it is only in the half-emperor stage and has the strength to surpass the God Lord. In the God realm, only the main god in peak state can defeat Shataya. There is no main god in the Storm God realm, so Shataya can do whatever she wants. Chen Hao looked at the card collection book in his hand. In this way, the 7 series of God Lord cores are enough. All the big wolves can be promoted to the God Lord stage. Now all that is needed is time. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and 4 days passed. This morning, the sun shines through the clouds and falls on the palace on the mysterious island. A ray of sunlight shines through the window into the bedroom in the palace. Chen Hao, who feels the light, slowly opens his eyes. He looks at the familiar ceiling above, and a smile appears on his face. Today is a day worth looking forward to. Because today, most of the beasts owned by Chen Hao have reached the God Lord stage. Like Shataya just reached the Lord God stage today. Chen Hao sat up. First, Zayadi. I have to let Zayadi out and let it prepare breakfast. Chen Hao looked at the card that was used to put Zayadi in the card slot before. God Lord Stage Light Illusion Butterfly God Lord. Taming Degree, 100%. Light Illusion Butterfly God Lord, Light Attribute Monster, Special Move, Ultimate Light Healing Technique. It can cover a large range of targets and instantly heal the target. The special move has a range of 100 kilometers. The effect of this special move looks the same as before, but Chen Hao remembers that when he was in the God General stage before, the range was within 500 meters. 100 kilometers, that range is terrifying. The range has expanded, although it is not stated explicitly, but since it is in the God Lord stage, the effect must have changed.